최적 방수 기술 설계를 위한 방수 공법 개발을 지속적으로 진행하고 있습니다.
The advanced waterproofing solutions of the company have been applied to the domestic public infrastructure as well as the renowned buildings in different parts of the world. Based on the successful projects it has completed, including the Marina Coastal Expressway in Singapore and Boston Big Dig Underpass in the US, the firm has targeted new markets and planned to expand the scope of its business.
완전 방수의 꿈에는 국경이 없습니다라는 비전 아래 전 세계 건축 토목 구조물에 100% 완전 방수를 실현하고 영구적인 누수 보수 기술, 방수 신소재를 보유한 글로벌 기업으로 성장을 목표로 하고 있습니다. 더 나아가 2022년 한국화학연구원으로부터 PET의 화학적 재활용 원천 기술을 이전받은 리뉴 시스템은 난분해성 플라스틱 폐기물의 화학적 재생 및 재활용 기술을 통해서 지구 환경을 지키고 순환 경제 및 탄소 중립 실현에 노력할 것입니다.
Renew System has developed advanced technologies that can benefit both humans and nature. Also, it has created a safer environment for the future generation by protecting major structures from all around the world. And we hope it can make greater contributions to the safety of underground spaces in the near future.
drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% since rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, July 29th, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung highlights yet again the importance of promoting a corporate culture of workplace safety to fight fatalities within the working environment. And Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul departs for the U.S. today for tariff talks as the Trump administration speaks of import duties between 15% and 20% for American trade partners who have yet to hammer out bilateral deals with Washington. Meanwhile, government officials and ruling party lawmakers are turning toward higher taxation to tackle the shortfall in tax revenue, and accordingly, corporate tax may return to 25% from the current 24%. The Lee Jae-myung administration has pledged to prevent the loss of life at workplaces in an unprecedented live broadcast of the entire cabinet discussion on the matter. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Safety should be a basic duty, not a financial burden.
Just days after visiting a bread factory where multiple workers were killed on the job, President Lee Jae-myung at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday doubled down on his pledge to eliminate what he calls regressive industrial accidents.
똑같은 장소에서 똑같은 사고가 발생하는 거는 똑같은 방식으로 특히 사망하는 거는 충분히 예상할 수 있는 일인데 이 예상할 수 있는 일들을 방어하지 않고 사고가 나는 거는 결국 죽음을 용인하는 거죠. 아주 심하게 얘기하면 법률적 용어로 미필적 고의에 의한 살인 아닙니까?
In a first for any South Korean administration, the president ordered the entire cabinet discussion on the matter to be broadcast live.
The president said measures to prevent industrial accidents must be shared openly. The frequency and scope of such disclosures could be expanded.
A range of ideas were proposed to make this year the turning point in ending workplace deaths.
We'll pursue measures like punitive damages, restrictions on who can bid for government-led projects, and suspending operations. We must hold those with real decision-making power accountable.
When major accidents happen, listed companies face lower ESG ratings, investor pullback, or restricted lending. We'll review how these penalties are applied and look to strengthen them.
The focus was on breaking the perception among some employers that skipping safety measures is cost-saving.
산업안전보건법 각 조항의 안전조치를 정해놓고 그걸 위반했을 때 과태료 최소 5만 원, 최대 5천만 원이라는데 이렇게 하면 지킬 이유가 없죠.
필요성을 제고하겠습니다.
요거를 어떻게 개정할지 이것도 한번 검토를 하고 논의를 한번 해보죠.
Wrapping up, the president asked each ministry to take swift action, whether drafting new laws, adjusting budgets, or visiting work sites.
So with most of his cabinet positions now filled, President Lee stressed the need for cross-ministerial coordination to tackle pending issues and also hinted that cabinet meetings may be held more than once a week to speed up progress. 송유진, Arirang News.
At the Parliament, confirmation hearings for the nominees to lead the culture as well as land ministries took place today. Our National Assembly correspondent Shin Ha-young covers the latest sessions.
The National Assembly held confirmation hearings on Tuesday, continuing its review of nominees for Lee Jae-myung's first cabinet, this time focusing on his picks for land and culture ministers. During the hearing of the nominee for Culture, Sports and Tourism Minister Choi Wi-young, the current CEO of travel platform Noel Universe emphasized his commitment to materializing President Lee's vision of a K-culture market worth 300 trillion won, around $215 billion and attracting 30 million inbound tourists.
Culture is a part of the economy that is a key to international competitiveness. I will help industries such as movies and games overcome challenges and support local content creators and streaming services to help them succeed worldwide.
Che also said he would develop a new K-tourism strategy to turn the global popularity of Korean culture into visits to regions across the country. To prepare for the growing use of AI, he pledged to support content innovation and help build AI training data that reflects Korea's history and culture. On the same day, Kim Yoon-deok, the nominee for Land, Infrastructure and Transport Minister and a three-term lawmaker of the ruling Democratic Party, pledged to quickly roll out a plan to boost housing supply.
I will increase housing supply in prime locations, such as near subway stations, by using available land and old public facilities. Redevelopment and reconstruction projects will also be promoted with a focus on balancing public and private interests.
Kim also emphasized his commitment to achieving balanced regional growth, saying it is not a choice but a matter of survival. He noted that while local areas are struggling with an economic slowdown and rising unsold homes, housing prices in Seoul and the capital region are soaring, adding that the problem can only be solved through balanced regional growth. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Staying at the National Assembly, government officials and ruling party lawmakers are turning toward higher taxation to tackle the shortfall in tax revenue. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has details.
The South Korean government and the ruling party have agreed to raise the country's top corporate tax rate to 25%, reversing a cut introduced by the previous administration. The decision was made on Tuesday during a policy consultation meeting at the National Assembly as part of ongoing efforts to finalize the 2025 tax reform framework. This increases the rate by 1 percentage point from the current 24% as set back in 2022. The two sides also plan to tighten capital gains tax rules by lowering the threshold for major shareholders. Currently, only those holding over 5 billion won, roughly $3.6 million in a single listed stock are taxed. Under the new plan, that threshold would be reduced to 1 billion won or just under $720,000. Officials say the changes aim to restore tax equity and rebuild the nation's revenue base, with the Democratic Party having criticized the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's previous cuts as benefiting the wealthy.
We'll correct the tax system to fix the revenue collapse and fiscal crisis. The Treasury is empty. We are buried in debt. In just 2 years, corporate tax revenues have dropped by 41 trillion won. For the first time ever, income taxes from workers have surpassed those from corporations. This level of shortfall, year after year, is not just emptying the state coffers, it's shaking the foundation of government operations.
Meanwhile, debate continues over a separate proposal to apply lower flat rate taxation to dividend income. While the government argues it would encourage corporate payouts and boost the stock market, some ruling party politicians warn it could disproportionately benefit high net worth investors. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Korea's top economic officials are racing against time to seal a deal with their American counterparts prior to this coming Friday's deadline on the pause in country-specific U.S. tariffs. Our Park Jun-an has the latest.
High-level South Korean officials are going all out as they engage in trade talks, crisscrossing the globe to negotiate with their U.S. counterparts, reflecting Seoul's determination to mitigate the economic impact of potential reciprocal tariffs of 25%. On Tuesday, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Ko Yoon-chul flew to Washington to continue negotiations with the U.S., saying he will do his utmost to secure a deal.
We will do our best to reach a mutually beneficial deal for both South Korea and the United States, with our national interests at the core.
South Korea's trade delegation, led by Industry Minister Kim Jong-un and Trade Minister Yo-jong has pursued relentless talks, following U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and U.S. Tier Ambassador Jamieson Greer from Washington, D.C., to New York, and even to Scotland, where they met during President Trump's visit there.
Well, the South Koreans flew to Scotland to meet with me and Ambassador Greer after dinner. I mean, think of how much they really want to get a deal done.
On July 31st, Deputy Prime Minister Ko Yoon-chul is scheduled to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, while Foreign Minister Cho Hyun, who departed for Japan on Tuesday, will meet Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as both sides push to seal a comprehensive agreement. Meanwhile, Hanwha Group's Vice Chairman Kim Dong-kwan departed for Washington on Monday to support the tariff negotiations. Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Jae-yong followed on Tuesday afternoon. Kim is expected to propose a shipbuilding cooperation project between the two countries, while Yi will push expanded semiconductor investment and technical collaboration on advanced AI chips in the U.S. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
And U.S. trade partners who have yet to hammer out a bilateral deal with the Trump administration will see their tariffs hovering between 15% and 20%. So says Donald Trump. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump hinted that his administration expects to set tariffs somewhere between 15 to 20% for most of the countries that have not yet reached a trade deal. The U.S. leader made the remarks during a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland, as Trump's reciprocal tariffs, including the 25% levies on South Korea, are set to go into effect on Friday. Senior trade officials from Seoul have been busy with their negotiation efforts, but have yet to reach a deal. The Trump administration has so far agreed to bilateral trade deals with the EU, the UK, Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Meanwhile, in Stockholm, top U.S. and Chinese trade officials held talks for more than 5 hours with the aim of resolving long-standing economic disputes. Washington has given an August 12th deadline to China to reach a tariff agreement after the two economic powerhouses reached preliminary deals in May and June to end their tit-for-tat tariffs. The two sides are expected to continue discussions on Tuesday. A different kind of deadline was also issued by President Trump on Monday, as he gave Russia 10 or 12 days for Russia to reach a peace deal or face tough new sanctions.
Yeah, I'd say 10 to 12 days. I'll announce it probably tonight or tomorrow. But there's no reason to wait. If you know what the answer is going to be, why wait? And it would be sanctions and maybe tariffs, secondary tariffs. You know what a secondary tariff is.
Trump has repeatedly voiced frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin for continued attacks on Ukraine, despite his efforts to end the war. 이승재, Arirang News.
In other news, Monday was a mixed day for Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average surrendered over 64 points, while the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq gained ground to close at all-time highs. Investors are awaiting big tech earnings reports, details from this week's policy meeting of the Federal Reserve, as well as key economic data, such as July's employment numbers. North Korea's Kim Yo-jong suggests that dialogue between her brother Kim Jong-un and his American counterpart Donald Trump can take place if the U.S. discards its demand for denuclearization. Our Choi Soo-young covers her remarks.
On Tuesday, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of the regime's leader Kim Jong-un, said through the North state-run Korean Central News Agency that the U.S. must accept the new reality. She added that if Washington continues to cling to the past, any meeting with the North will remain only America's hope. Kim noted that the personal relationship between the U.S. President Donald Trump and the North leader Kim Jong-un is not bad. But she stressed that if the U.S. intended to use this relationship as a step toward denuclearization, it would only be regarded as mockery to the North. She said that since Trump's first term, both North Korea's nuclear capabilities and the geopolitical environment have changed dramatically. Kim warned that any attempt to deny the position of the North as a nuclear weapons state will be thoroughly rejected. She also said it would not be wise for two nuclear-armed states to move toward confrontation, suggesting that other forms of contact should be explored. Following Kim's statement, the White House has again said that President Trump remains open to talks with Kim Jong-un about denuclearization. Washington and Pyongyang held summits in Singapore in June 2018 and in Hanoi in February 2019, and later met at Panmunjom in June 2019. Following Kim's statement, South Korea's presidential office said Seoul and Washington remain open to dialogue with Pyongyang and will work closely to restore inter-Korean trust and resume U.S.-North Korea talks. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
And South Korea has called on North Korea to retrieve a body found last month near Gangwado Island. An ID identified the man as Ko Sung-chul, a North Korean farm worker, with an address in Hwanghae-pukto province. With inter-Korean hotline severed, Seoul is resorting to the media to return the body via Panmunjom on August 5th. The Unification Ministry here says it's acting on humanitarian grounds. Pyongyang, for its part, has yet to respond. And U.S. President Donald Trump has reaffirmed Washington's commitment to protecting the Korean Peninsula in accordance with the policy of peace through strength. The message was shared on Monday, a day after the 72nd anniversary of the Korean Armistice Agreement. He added that American and South Korean armies stand united today under a strong alliance, though the evil of communism still exists in Asia. While acknowledging the two Koreas remain divided, he spoke of pride in being the first to cross the 38th parallel during his first term. South Korea recently hosted a group of Korean War veterans to commemorate their selflessness and sacrifice in defending democracy here on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Jong-il reports.
They were in their early 20s when they first arrived in Korea, young men in uniform sent to fight in a country they had never seen. 7 decades later, some of them have returned. 55 guests from 19 countries are taking part in South Korea's Revisit Korea, Review Korea program. Among them, 6 veterans of the Korean War, their families, and delegates from veterans associations. As part of the 6-day program, participants visited the War Memorial of Korea ahead of the official commemoration ceremony on Sunday.
And came here in 1952. Actually, my experience in the war was as a tank driver. We had to defend that place because otherwise the Chinese communists would overrun and come back to Seoul. So that was our job.
Now 91, Yamashiroya was joined by his grandson, who reflected on his grandfather's influence on their family.
And he's a really strong and tough person, mentally, and he's really ingrained that in our family and everything he's done. So yeah, it's definitely an honor learning more about the culture of Korea, the history behind the war, hearing about their impact. It means a lot.
I'm so happy for the Korean people because they persevered and make a success out of themselves.
While some veterans were able to return, others could not. Sunday ceremony was held for UN Forces Participation Day, South Korea's official day to honor foreign veterans of the Korean War. U.S. Army Corporal Fred B. McGee was recognized with the country's highest military honor. His daughter accepted the medal on his behalf.
What you've done here this past week has been highly commendable. It's above and beyond anything that I expected. I just celebrate the Korean government and the Korean people for all they've done for the Korean War veterans.
The medal was presented by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, who also addressed the ceremony.
To protect the freedom and peace of the Republic of Korea, 1.98 million UN troops stood alongside the Korean people. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten.
For the veterans and families who visited this time, the trip offered not only commemoration, but connection. Kim Jong-il, Arirang News.
This year's APEC host city Gyeongju is rich in historical relics from the Shilla Kingdom. Our An Sang-jin walks us through some of these treasures.
The APEC Economic Leaders Meeting has returned to South Korea for the first time in 20 years. And this time it's going to take place in Gyeongju.
Gyeongju, where history breathes through the city, stood as the capital of the Shilla Kingdom for 1,000 years. Renowned for its deep cultural roots, what kind of traces of historical legacy can we find today?
These royal tombs are where the past rises from the earth itself. Daereungwon is a massive burial ground that covers more than 126,000 square meters and houses 23 tombs of Shilla royalty. Visitors can even go inside Cheonmachong, or Heavenly Horse Tomb, and see the golden accessories found in the wooden burial chamber. Nearby these royal tombs that echo Shilla's souls, Cheomseongdae Astronomical Observatory, one of the oldest observatories in Asia, shows the intellect and sophistication of the Shilla people. And further afield, Bulguksa Temple is considered a masterpiece of Buddhist architecture. Home to national treasures including Tabutap and Seokgatap, the 2 pagodas, this World Heritage Site hints at the religious and artistic aspects of the ancient Shilla capital. And those looking for a deeper understanding can visit the Gyeongju National Museum and have a peek at the Golden Crown from Kumgwonchong Tomb. From ancient relics to cultural landmarks throughout the city, Gyeongju stands as a living monument for Korea's rich cultural heritage, an open-air museum where Shilla's 1,000 years of history still breathes. An Sang-jin, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
And actor Park Bo-gum has been appointed as an honorary ambassador for Korean tourism. On Tuesday, the Culture Ministry unveiled 2 promotional videos featuring Park, including the campaign's theme song On My Way, sung by the actor himself. A preview event for the new global campaign was also held the same day, introducing themed videos supporting tourism in regions such as Gyeongsang-do provinces, highlighting Gyeongju, the host city of the upcoming APEC 2025 Korea.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump has acknowledged that the crisis in Gaza has reached a point of real starvation and vowed to build food centers in the enclave. Speaking during a visit to Scotland on Monday, Trump said visual evidence convinced him that starvation in Gaza is real and pledged the creation of U.S.-backed food centers in coordination with European partners. Trump emphasized that the current aid infrastructure is deeply flawed, adding the U.S. would work with other countries to establish food centers without entry barriers, allowing civilians to access aid freely. According to the White House, additional details on the plan are forthcoming. Trump's remarks are in stark contrast with those of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has denied that Gaza is facing starvation, saying Israel continues to allow significant amounts of humanitarian aid into the enclave. Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire starting Monday midnight local time, following 5 days of border clashes that killed nearly 40 people and displaced hundreds of thousands. This follows negotiations in Malaysia headed by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. At a joint press conference with acting Thai Prime Minister Phumtham Wechayachai and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet, Anwar outlined the step-by-step de-escalation process of the conflict. He also stated that a broader border committee session is scheduled for August 4th in Cambodia to address long-standing territorial issues. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump said he had phoned the leaders of both countries and celebrated the outcome, calling himself the president of peace. In Africa, the UN reported on Monday that the attack on a Catholic church in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on Sunday was done by a group linked to the Islamic State. At least 43 churchgoers were killed when armed fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces, a group affiliated with IS, entered the church in the town of Komanda in the Ituri province. The attackers also set fire to nearby homes and shops. Over 20 victims were buried in a mass grave on Monday. MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping mission in the region, condemned the attack as revolting. Pope Leo XIV also denounced the deadly attack, expressing sorrow and describing the victims as martyrs. Disney has released the first official trailer for Avatar: Fire and Ash, the third installment in James Cameron's epic sci-fi saga, on Monday. The trailer debuted exclusively in theaters alongside Marvel's The Fantastic Four: First Steps and is now available online. It encompasses the visionary land, sea, and air worlds of Pandora at their most dramatic, and also unveils the Ash Clan, a tribe that inhabits volcanic regions. Reviews praise the trailer as a huge level up in action, world building, and emotional depth. The movie is set to open in theaters in December. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The steaming heat is making us afraid to go outside. With the heat wave warnings continuing today, the daytime temperature rose above 36 degrees Celsius in most regions. And the heat will be raging. For the time being, the heat will continue day and night. As the heat has been continuing for a long time, special attention should be paid to health care. Meanwhile, sea waves will be very high, up to 4.5 meters in the southern seas. There will be high swells around coastal areas of Jeju Island and the southern coast. Please take extra precautions when on the beach during the summer vacation. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 27 degrees, Gyeongju at 24 degrees. Daily highs will go up to around 35 to 36 degrees in most parts of the country.
There are showers forecast only in the central and northern parts of Gangwon-do province tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session.
(2025) celebrates the 80th anniversary of liberation. A place filled with culture, history, and diverse experiences. This is the Independence Hall of Korea. Upholding the values of the independence movement, and together with the whole nation, we will make Korea great. The Independence Hall of Korea.
Held its first debate over the weekend. The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN summit.
It's a massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
미래를 준비하는 코딩 교육 전문가.
Change the way you start skincare. 7 vegan peptide, maximum benefits for your skin. And amplify the effect of the next skincare step. Boosting, glowing, and brightening. Effortless care. Visible results. 7 vegan peptide booster. Mizone.
President Lee Jae-myung has turned the spotlight onto the basic rights of workers to a safe and healthy working environment. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's July 29th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Now, earlier on this Tuesday, President Lee Jae-myung presided over a cabinet meeting that sought ways to prevent workplace fatalities. For more, I have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I also have Sébastien Felletti with French daily Le Figaro. Sébastien, it's been such a long time. Great to have you back.
Very happy to be back. Thank you.
Right, Thomas, we will start with you. Let's begin with President Lee Jae-myung's call for action against abuse of migrant workers here in the country. Let's begin with some context behind his comments and your takeaways.
Right. Well, I think you're referring to Lee Jae-myung was reacting to a video that went viral last week that showed a Sri Lankan worker who was at a brick factory in South Jeolla province. Gyeongju is the name of the town, and he was. A video was shown where he was bound to a stack of bricks by plastic wrap, like wrapped up with it, and then picked up by a forklift and was being driven around on it. And you can kind of hear people laughing and making fun of him on the video. And a human rights, like a migrant worker human rights group, released the video last week, and it's spurred outrage in the country, and Lee Jae-myung responded to it on Facebook. He said, "I couldn't believe my eyes," called it a intolerable violation, clear human rights infringement. And, he's gone on to say that, we need to basically respond to this, do more to improve conditions, kind of gave the Ministry of Employment and Labor instructions to investigate and work on this issue. And obviously it's a shocking video if you've seen it, and the individual himself in it has said that, this is, I think he kept it, didn't advertise it or didn't talk about it for a while, but he said it's kind of stuck with him over the weeks and months since it happened, and has made his just difficult for him to go to work, and he's felt humiliated and bad. And I think it just, reflects an issue that has been around for a long time of the conditions that migrant laborers face in Korea. But, it's kind of been, it's so often it's a kind of out of sight, out of mind issue. Stories flare up. I mean, there was a big one in 2021 about a migrant Cambodian worker who died, froze to death in a farm, and basically had been sleeping in a greenhouse, and that kind of highlighted the issues of the working conditions for migrant workers. But, I feel like these stories pop up and then they kind of go back under the rug a little bit. Alongside workplace safety issues, there's just the whole system that they work under is of, some activists or rights, advocates kind of compare it to indentured servitude, sort of. They're under this employment permit system, but they have very limited rights. Once they're here on their visa, it's very hard for them to leave the employer, even if they're being underpaid, they work long hours, they face abusive and dangerous conditions, but they have very little, ability to switch jobs. It's very restrictive. They can, but there's a lot of requirements of, you need to be able to have another job lined up within 3 months, et cetera. So, these have been issues that I think they're just kind of easy to ignore when they disappear, because in a way, they're a population here here in South Korea that I feel like most of us don't see on a day-to-day basis. The areas where they live and work are often, they're not. You don't see Seoul, these big concentrations. Usually it's in towns like Pocheon or these other areas. So unless you actually go there, you almost don't know that there are this many workers here. So it's a question that this has obviously raised the issue, and it sort of folds into a little bit of what else we're going to talk about as far as workplace safety stuff. So maybe this will become something that Lee Jae-myung will talk more about, and the administration will try to address more. But yeah, it's been a serious issue for quite a long time.
Right. And before we delve further into the situation here in the country, Sebastian, for some comparison, that is, efforts to ensure the protection of migrant workers, they extend beyond national borders. I hear a French court recently ruled in favor of migrant workers in the champagne industry. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, the luxurious champagne industry is using a lot of illegal workers, like a lot of the farmers in France, in Europe, but also like the food and beverage industry, like restaurants, hospitality. I mean, basically, this case you're referring to a couple of days ago, a French court condemned to jail 3 ringleaders of basically it's a human trafficking ring, in a way where they were bringing workers from many countries like Ukraine, but also from Africa, to work in the vineyard, especially during the harvest season, which is which require a lot of labor. You have to pick all the grapes. It's something that traditionally people were doing in France for centuries. At that moment, you need a lot of people, and these days, most of these vineyards or farms can't find the people in France or in their home country, so they're going further beyond, and a lot of them are actually on the illegal case, and these basically the court ruling said they were mistreated, they were not recognized any rights. I mean, some of the complainants said they were treated like slaves. But this issue illustrates a very general practice. I think in France or in Europe, a lot of, for example, construction companies there's a lot of hypocrisy because they are using these kind of illegal network to get cheap labor. Because this is the other side of the coin, is that in France or in Europe there's a very generous social benefit. So if you want to hire someone as a company, it costs you a lot of money. So for this company, it has a lot of advantage to hire this illegal worker because of first they don't find locally the people to do that, but also it's cheaper, and you can basically impose on them very long hours. So these cases are highlighting these widespread practices. But it's also coming in a very heated political discussion where immigration is taking center stage in France, all across Europe, like in the US. And basically, it comes at a moment where in France, some people on the right side of the aisle are advocating that French social system is too generous, and that's one reason why it's attracting as a magnet so many illegal migrants, because if you are even an illegal migrant in France, you can still benefit from very basic social care for free. So some people now, including the government, are advocating that we should be less generous on that in order to fight against so-called illegal immigration.
Right, I see. And that, of course, is the situation over in France then. Thomas, back here with the national borders, the South Korean government, for its part, has recently mandated breaks for outdoor workers. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so there was a revision to the occupational safety and health standards earlier this month, requires outdoor workers to receive at least 20 minutes of rest for every 2 hours when apparent temperatures, I guess that's the sort of, the field temperature exceeds 33 degrees Celsius. And, this is something that's an actual, if there's a violation, the employer may face up to 7 years in prison or a fine of up to 100 million Korean won. So it's, it's something that actually has some teeth. I think in the past, occupational safety advocates have complained that a lot of what the Ministry of Employment and Labor has done were not mandates, but sort of recommendations. So this is something that does have a kind of a mandate to it. And it's coming on the heels of there have been a number of heat-related deaths among outdoor workers. One of them earlier this month was a Vietnamese day laborer in North Gyeongju province who was found dead on the ground with his body temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius. So that also sort of speaks to, a lot of these are also migrant workers who are being affected by this. And as you know, if you're here in South Korea, this has been the hottest summer in several years. I was looking up the statistics. Over 2,300 heat illnesses have been reported so far. It's 2.7 times higher than last year. 11 people have died from heat-related causes this year. So, this is something that had been worked on for a while. I think, advocates were trying to get it passed even last year, but there was resistance. It's kind of the opposite of what the situation I think is in Europe, where there's probably less sort of social safety net and worker benefits, or worker protections here. And so advocates, business advocates are saying this was going to cause an undue burden on small and medium businesses. So it took a while to get through, but this passed, and so, of course, obviously it's, I think, probably good for people working in these conditions, but rights advocates are still saying, this is not enough. It only actually covers sort of regular employees, and I think it only applies to workplaces of over a certain number of people, such as five or more. And so a lot of gig employees are not covered by this, and that's all, for a long time also been a serious issue of workplace deaths or workplace illnesses, talking about delivery drivers and kind of contract workers at factories, so those sorts of situations are still not being covered. And I think, advocates would say, look more towards the types of things Europe does, such as mandating stopping work when, the temperature reaches a certain height instead of just, giving this small break. But in any case, I think it's a step forward, and it's obviously reacting to a very real situation on the ground.
Right, and staying with this, Sebastian, as Thomas mentioned, the loss of lives at workplaces has been strongly denounced by President Lee Jae-myung. He held a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday that was broadcast live, an unprecedented act right there, where he called for action against fatalities within the workplace. Again, could you give us some context, and what do you believe is the significance of this latest call for action?
Well, clearly, President Lee Jae-myung wants to put the spotlight on this issue. He seems he wants to kind of break a culture of a lack of preparedness in the country, of recurring tragedies. Of course, this is a way to differentiate himself from his predecessor, a conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol, but also this is also a way to burnish his own legacy as a president coming from a underprivileged background, who in his youth worked in factories, and who was himself victim. That's what he said in his memoir, that he was victim of accident and was injured on his left arm during while working as a teenager in factories. So this is really a small way to highlight a very sensitive and significant, important message, but at the same time telling your people and your base where you're coming from, and reaffirm that you are the president of the working class forces, the people who elected you. So it's also like a shrewd, probably political calculation from himself. It's all the more important at a moment where on the economic front, the current administration is taking a very pragmatic approach. They have to deal with many issues, including tariff from Trump. Also, he has to team up with chaebols. So it's also a way to remind everyone that even though he's very pragmatic, where is he coming from? And he's here to defend the working class people in this country. And it's a way also to flag the the bad record of some of the companies that he visited, where there were several deaths in the past few months, in POSCO, in SPC. So that's part of, I think, of a bigger picture, which is also political.
Right. Thomas, let's move now from labor to livelihoods. The so-called government's consumption coupons have been available since last week. What has been the take-up rate there, and what has been the public response?
Well, the public seems to like them so far. I think, people like getting free money, basically, or money from the government, but more than 70% of the eligible recipients applied for the coupons. It's called the Livelihood Recovery Support Fund. So applied during the first 5 days, so from Monday to Friday of last week. And so these were basically payments of around 150,000 won to eligible citizens and even some foreign nationals. And then some other groups get a higher boost, and lower income groups, single parent households. There's even rural areas and different regional areas get a bit more. And these are basically to be used at small businesses. So you can't use them at sort of big chains or big box stores. So the idea, as Lee Jae-myung kind of laid it out, was to create this sort of virtuous cycle of consumption and stimulating the economy, get some money moving, bring it to small businesses that have been affected. And he's kind of reacting, again, obviously there's a political element to it, but it had an economic impact of just the previous several months of the year. South Korea was undergoing, this period of chaos and uncertainty around the, martial law and impeachment period of, under former President Yoon Suk-yeol. And, the economy contracted in the first quarter of the year, surprisingly, and there still is kind of a global uncertainty around the tariff scheme with Washington. So, it was almost a reaction to something like a real shock to the system, to try and get some, money flowing again and get it to the businesses. And it's part of a, supplementary budget that something more than $23 billion, and included wiping off debt from over 1 million small businesses. So, the reaction seems to have been positive. South Korea's consumer sentiment rose to a 4-year high in July. And, the economy itself grew in the second quarter after shrinking in the first quarter. So, I think there's been a positive reaction to it. And, we've seen a little maybe bump, at least certainly in the consumer confidence. The concerns are, of course, that it could just be a one-off thing. It's a short-lived impact. There's obviously you do have to pay for this somewhere, and there have been some criticisms that there was excessive administrative costs in just rolling this whole system out. So I think we'll end up seeing what the net impact is. But it's been a boost. For consumer sentiment, and I think it's given Lee Jae-myung's administration a popularity boost, at least in these early weeks as well.
Right. Meanwhile, Sebastian, the president's approach to crisis management has also been on full display amid the deadly downpour earlier this month. How has he worked to communicate with the public and perhaps to collaborate with his administration in response to the repercussions of this latest torrential rain?
Yeah, President Lee Jae-myung has been very swift to reach out to the population, to visit some of the places impacted by this major flood. As an experienced, shrewd politician, he knows that the impact of those natural catastrophe can also drag the popularity of leaders, and actually his own approval rate, which is still pretty high, dipped a couple of points at the first few days of the flood, from 64% to 62%. So immediately he responded by going in the field and showing and telling officials that they need to be full on at the service of the people. So this is also a way to convey to the population that his administration is an administration for the people, that it's not an administration that's only for a certain group. And of course, the president he remembers that some of the previous administrations have been deeply impacted by mismanagement during crisis. We can remember of of course, the Itaewon tragedy during the past administration, where there was some accusation that the administration was not prepared for these masses of people. If we look back further down, we know that there was the Seoul tragedy with the ferry. All those tragedies have been sticking to the record of those past presidents, President Park Geun-hye and President Yoon Suk-yeol. So, I mean, President Lee Jae-myung knows that this is very important to show and to react very swiftly, to show to the people that we are taking care of this seriously, and then we will do the utmost to protect the life of citizens. So that's a very important message that he wants to send. And it's also a way to differentiate himself from his predecessor. It's all of a bigger picture that this administration is working with the people from day one. That's what he's been trying to say. Let's not forget that there was no transition period between the previous president and the new president. This time, usually there's around 2 months. So the message of this administration is that we are here from day one for you. And so the president is everywhere in the media, is paying a lot of attention to communication. That's part of this narrative. And if we look at approval rate, it's so far working. We are in kind of honeymoon period for president. It's still pretty high in the 60s, basically around that time. So it's pretty good. It's better than his predecessor, but still it's below what for President Moon Jae-in, or even President Lee Myung-bak were enjoying at the very same moment after roughly 2 months in office. So it tells where we are at the moment. There is a sense that this president is pragmatic, and so there is for now quite a broad consensus. But the question is how long this moment of unanimity is going to last. That's what we will see in the coming months.
Right, we will. Thomas, very briefly speaking, in the political arena, 2 of the president's nominees will not be joining his cabinet. Could you tell us a bit about this?
Right, I was going to say this is the other sort of speed bump so far in President Lee Jae-myung's administration. Lee Jin-suk, Education Minister, and Kang Sun-woo was the nominee for Minister of Gender Equality and Family. Lee Jin-suk, Lee Jae-myung withdrew her nomination last week. She was charged with allegations of plagiarizing some of her academic work and sent her daughters to the U.S. for education, including one of them on her own for middle school, which actually violates Korea's education laws. And Kang Sun-woo had allegations of workplace bullying, mistreating aides, getting them to fix household items, things like that. And Lee Jae-myung was going to stick with her, but then she voluntarily withdrew. And so these definitely had a little, I think, hit on his popularity as well. And these are the kinds of things that I think he would like to avoid if he wants to present this differentiating factor, compared to previous administrations. And there's such a sensitivity towards some of these issues. Academic, especially, seems to always really stick in, political lives. We've seen a lot of political figures kind of brought down by favoritism of, their children or sort of plagiarism scandals. So I think, it's not a great look for him, to start off this way, but so far both are gone, and we'll see if he can move forward relatively unimpeded with the rest of his cabinet.
Right, time will tell us then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thomas, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Sebastian, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you for the invitation.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow for yet another edition of Press Perspective, this time on Korea's standing as a cultural powerhouse.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer